Hello and welcome to Spacewalk's Money Talks, where we talk about outer space business, technology, and policy. I'm Chris Alvarez, and today's guest is James Miller, who talks about planetary spacecraft navigation and about JPL history. This interview is being posted in 2 parts. This is part 2. Thank you for listening. I'm speaking with James Miller, author of Planetary Spacecraft Navigation.
The reason I got into the book, Jerry Hintz, he teaches at USC.
Mm-hmm.
And I started working 1971 with him on Viking. And he was doing the orbit mechanics for the orbiting. And I was doing the insertion burn to get the spacecraft in the orbit.
Mm-hmm.
So I know him pretty well. I've been working with him for 50 years. And a lot of times I didn't treat him very good either, because he was working on all his celestial mechanics and trying to understand it, but he wasn't very good with the computer. But we got through it anyway. And eventually he just got tired of JPL crap, and he teaches at USC.
Mm-hmm.
He teaches a course in the astrodynamics in their department. And so they have PhD students, in the department. So he called me up one day. He knew I was, retired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he says, you have a computer program that could be run. As a student, it needs a computer program to check out what his theory. Okay, and can you help him? Can you give him the computer? I say, oh yeah, look, my computer program is in the public domain, and anybody can have it. He can do whatever he wants with it. That's fine. However, there is no user's guide or instructions on how to run this program, except what I wrote for the NEAR mission. My program was actually used on the NEAR mission to navigate the spacecraft.
Okay.
And so I got so everything that I got in my book, I'm just those equations have been tested by having them programmed into an actual software that was used to fly a spacecraft and orbit an asteroid and land on an asteroid and determine I put the latitude and longitude lines on an asteroid.
Oh, wow.
I determined the gravity and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Hintz, he asked me, and I told him, I said, look, it'd be easier if he tells me what he wants to do. I'll set the program up to do what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And train him how to run it. And that'll just take about 10 minutes because he'll understand right away. But I have to make a run for him of what he's doing, because setting the original setup is going to be difficult for him because he doesn't know everything about how it works.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that, and I started working with this guy. So I started doing that with his PhD students. I would help them find out what they were trying to do, and then I would make the program do it. And then I would say, here's the inputs you make. And so that's how I got started. And he said, you should write a book.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, if I write a book, nobody's going to publish it. He said, well, why don't you send in a proposal? And I thought, well, he's been telling me that for about 20 years. He keeps asking me, when am I going to finish my book? And I said, look, I'm never going to finish the book because I got those papers. If you want to know what's in the book, just read my papers. So finally, he convinced me to submit a proposal.
Mm-hmm.
So I submitted a 2-page proposal to Springer, and I figured that since I don't have a PhD, I don't even have a master's degree.
Right. Yeah.
But I have worked with people who are the smartest people in the field. They're brilliant. Caltech has some very smart people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I worked with some mathematicians. I played bridge with them. My bridge partner was probably the JPL's best mathematician. His name's Harry Lass. I mention him in my book sometimes too. Mm-hmm. But everybody liked him. But he was such a cantankerous person. He couldn't get along with anybody. and he would play bridge with me, and I'm bidding 3-no trump. After some bidding goes on, and he said, I hand after you bid, and I play the hand.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, he looked at the hand and he said, well, you got 26 points, or 29 points, I think, which if you had that many points, that means I got a lot of high card points. That means it'll be easy to win this contract, no problem whatsoever. So he folded the cards back and handed them to me, and he said, you won't have any trouble making that contract. He said, but of course you're going to screw it up, because Harry would never admit that. Harry would denigrate everybody, including me. If you haven't been criticized by Harry Last, then you don't know anything. He would never do this to anybody that was, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was only the smart asses that he would go after. But I played bridge with him, so I enjoyed it. And I didn't make the contract. So he said, I knew you were going to screw it up. I knew it. And the guy I was playing against is really good at bridge. Mm-hmm. He's as good as Harry. Bill Owen, he's the optical navigation expert. He's the world's leading optical navigation expert, but I know him for a long time. Mm-hmm. He looked at the cards, and he said, with that opening lead, it was impossible for him to make it. He told Harry Last that. Yeah. Well, you don't tell Harry Last that he's made a mistake or that he doesn't understand. Okay, so I left, and 4 hours later, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they're still arguing about this bridge hand.
Oh, wow.
And finally, Harry Last conceded that there was no way I could have made it. Yeah, that. Okay, you had a question, I think.
Oh, yeah. No, that was funny. So potentially, I don't know, maybe a naive question. As computing power has gotten greater over the years, has that changed your approach to how you use computers?
Oh, yeah. Well, remember I told you I was 5 years ahead? Mm-hmm. I'm the only electrical engineer in the navigation section at JPL. There's another section that does the instrumentation for the Doppler and the range and all that stuff. And so they concentrate on the electronics and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But I'm the computer navigator guy. And I've always had the best computers you could get. So I'm sitting it's about a week before Christmas, and I'm working on a paper. And I had never written any papers until I was 44 years old. At 1986, I think, that was the first paper I ever wrote. Okay. Because my attitude is that I don't want to be paid for being an academic. You have to pay me for being able to do the job. So therefore, I'm not writing any papers because that's a waste of time. So I was writing a paper, and this is about my third paper maybe. And my boss came into my office, and he says, I got a mini computer. A microcomputer, I forget what it was. I guess it's called a microcomputer. Right. Yeah. Well, it was a PC, in other words. Mm-hmm. This is the first one of the first PCs ever made. This is after Apple. I knew about Apple a little bit. I was totally uninterested because I use mainframes. I do everything on a big mainframe. Mm-hmm. So they had this little computer, and it had about a 4-inch screen, which was green, and it was in a box about twice as 2 loaves of bread, mm-hmm. And it was a video. It was not it was a video screen, and this is in 1982, I think. Okay. And it cost $10,000 for this little computer. So he wanted to give me one because he said we got a lot of money and it's the end of the year, so we got to spend it. And I said, there's nothing I could do with that. I said I'll be wasting my time. I said no. So then a week later, or 2 weeks later, he comes back and he says, this is your last chance. He said, if you don't get it now, the money's going to be gone. I said, okay. I said, all right, get one. I'll look at it. So I went home for the Christmas holidays, and I'm working on my paper, and my fingers get sore from pushing the pencil, Mm-hmm. And I take this computer, and I set it in my bedroom, back in the corner somewhere, and I just forgot about it. So after I got done with the paper and all that, and it's getting near New Year's, I decided to go back and see what this thing can do. So I drag it out of my, and put it on the table, and I first discovered that I could play chess. But then what I also discovered is they had a program called WordStar, which is like I think it was WordStar or something like it. It wasn't Microsoft Word. It was WordStar, and it does what Word does, mm-hmm. electronically does things, and you could print it on a dot matrix printer, which looked awful. Yeah. So once I discovered that, I never picked up a pencil again, even though my hand no longer has the callus on it where I hold the pencil. And what I did is me and another guy who was from that I knew from JPL that went to aerospace, we met at a conference a couple months later, mm-hmm. and I'm bragging. I said, guess what? I did this paper all by myself. And he said he said I did too. I said, well, the problem is a dot matrix printer is awful print for a conference paper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. However, what I discovered was that if you do it on 18-inch by 14-inch, big sheets of paper and split column, so you print out dot matrix stuff and then paste it on here, see, and then the figures are pasted on too. That's the way they used to do it. I knew that's the way they used to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then so you have this big thing, Well, when you shrink it down to 8.5 by 11, the dot matrix looks like just regular type. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I said, gee, this is it. I can do my papers now.
Yeah.
So I figured that out, and so I started doing all my papers that way. But as far as the computers are concerned,
yeah.
I was able to. One of the first jobs I had only a month. I actually designed a computer. It was I was at Westinghouse, and I went down to Baltimore for a 1-month stay. At that time, Westinghouse had a training program for engineers, and you go to different companies, and then you decide which one you want to go work for.
Okay.
And I went in as one, and it was doing a control system for a Lullenberg lens they put on an aircraft carrier, and it enables it to radar lens. And so they wanted to test the radar by turning the lens around on a platform and then having the antenna shine on it. And so it needed a computer control system.
Mm-hmm.
So he sat down, being the boss, I sat down and designed a computer. And he helped me, of course. I had a clock, just a clock, and then you had these flip flops and AND gates and OR gates and all this kind of stuff. The fundamental parts of a computer, which are now on chips. All this stuff is on a chip.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, each little fundamental part of a computer, like a summing, were all on cards.
Okay.
So this computer, which had a lot less capability than my watch, it would fill up about a room full of cabinets of cards. Not a room, but a couple cabinets full of cards.
Right.
Each card had a flip flop on it. You could have 10,000 flip flops. My cell phone, when I look at it, it's about 1 billion times bigger than that computer was. I designed that, so I knew how computers work, and I always programmed in Fortran. I never gave up programming in Fortran.
Mm-hmm.
New languages would come along. I knew that the new languages would only last for a couple of years, and then there'd be another new one, and it would never be any better than Fortran.
Huh.
They'd make improvements to Fortran, which would keep ahead of anything that they were doing. So I went through about 10 different languages, but I wrote all my programs in Fortran, and I kept them all.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a big library. I have about 30,000. I don't know.
I'm speaking with James Miller, author of Planetary Spacecraft Navigation. You can find more information on the Springer website for the book. If you like this podcast so far, please subscribe to it and rate it and review it if you can. Please go to my Facebook page, Spacewalks Money Talks, to find links to interesting space-related videos created by others. Please go to my Twitter page at SpacewalksMT for links to space news and science information. Please check out my Instagram page, Spacewalks Money Talks, for space photos. Please check out my YouTube channel, Spacewalks Money Talks, for space-related videos I've made. You can also sign up for my newsletter at spacewalksmoneytalks.com. In the newsletter, I post video and news links, as well as regular updates on new space, science, business, and history books being published. If you're interested in other kinds of history, such as military history, or film, TV, books, and comic books history, including science fiction, fantasy, and horror themes, you can find the links to my other podcasts and associated book lists at historyrabbithole.com. That's rabbit as in the animal. historyrabbithole.com. Thank you for your support. And now back to the podcast.
Thousands of programs and subroutines that I've kept up.
Wow.
And I knew that I could always find a Fortran compiler to when they switched computers. So they switched mainframes, and we had IBM computer around 1969, 70, and then around 70, when I was gone, they switched to a UNIVAC 1108.
Mm-hmm.
And I come walking in, and all the software that we use for navigation would not run on the 1108 without very expensive conversion. And so we almost had to start and reinvent a whole new set of programs.
Right.
I just took my deck of cards in Fortran and I just dropped them into the 1108 and figured out how to make it run. And I had my software was all running without any problem at all. It took me a day to get back online.
Oh, wow.
From that point on, I always tried to keep ahead of the curve and knew what was coming. And I knew that the programs would keep getting faster and faster. But one of the things that I use is in my book on Monte Carlo. The Monte Carlo takes a lot of time on a computer. But you need samples. And what you'd like to have is like 5,000 samples. Okay? Well, when I was at Lockheed Martin, one sample cost about $100 to run on a computer. So we had 29 samples, 30 maybe, something like that.
Yeah.
So that's not enough to really gather statistics. I mean, if you want to determine who's going to be president of the United States, you go out and interview 30 people. That's not going to give you a very reliable estimate, right? But that's what we did for this missile or this spacecraft that we're going to send to Kwajalein. We want to get in a 10-mile circle, so we'd run 29, and if they all went inside the circle, we'd say, okay, it's good.
Yeah.
Well, by the time I got to Viking, I started running my software, which to do this optimization, I have to optimize every sample. So that took us some time. And I inverted like about 1,000 6x6 matrices. Anyhow, I do a 500 sample, and that took an hour of CPU time. And it inverted like 40,000 6x6 matrices to do that in an hour. And it cost $800 for one run.
Oh, wow.
So I'm making these runs, and since the Viking is $1 billion project, a few million here, a few million there, after a while it adds up to some real money, but for 40,000, $1,000 is nothing. Whereas everybody else, they were lucky to get $10,000 for a budget for a month. I would blow their month's budget in one run. and one time I ran a computer, this was at Martin, and I flew the spacecraft to Kwajalein, and I'm integrating in. When it got into within 10 miles of Kwajalein, it would stop. The program would stop. Okay. So I come in one morning, and there's a stack of paper about 2 feet high, and a computer must have run for hours on this thing to get it to do it. And I thought, what the heck happened? Well, what happened was I missed the 10-mile circle, and I didn't have a stop in there that when it hit the surface of the Earth, it would stop. So it went in. It went straight. It came in just like the shuttle trajectory. If you look at the shuttle when it comes in, if you're standing, I was doing this. When it's coming in, you have to look straight up. It's like it's dropping like a rock right straight on top of you. Well, this thing was doing that. It went right straight down. It went through the center of the Earth over to whatever's on the other side, like China, and then it came back. And it oscillated back and forth through the center of the Earth, and it never hit the stopping. It never got within the 10 mile. And it probably cost a couple $1,000 for this run, because I know it was expensive, because at night, Martin Company, the computer I was running on, would sell computer time to the Department of Water and Power, Baltimore, and they would run their billing on this computer. So they're spending some real money. They're making real money selling time on this computer. Anyhow, I picked up the 2 feet stack of paper, and I sneaked around and found the dumpster and dumped it in there as fast as I could. Well, when I got to JPL, this was routine. I'd make a mistake. That's $1,000. Boom. Well, I was making $20,000 a year, and one year I spent $40,000 on computer runs.
Well.
And the reason was because I'm running to try to determine if we have enough fuel to run the Viking mission. Right. And so it kept changing the trajectory. It kept changing what they want to do. They like, for example, we're not going to land on the 4th of July because they finally figured that out. And then now I don't have any time, but I had anticipated that they were going to not land on the 4th of July. So I had done a study where we figured a lot of different possible landing sites and stuff like that. But so I'm making all these runs, and it cost a lot. But I knew that in the long run, that whatever I spend would be made up because computers would get even faster. And now the computer that's sitting right in front of me right now, it probably runs about 100 times faster than that 1108. Mm-hmm. And it costs, instead of $1,000 to make that run, I can make that run for 2 cents worth of electricity.
Right.
And it would take only an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Or less. It would take less than an hour to do it. This program this computer's 100 times faster than that 1108. So I planned my development of all my programs for the future, figuring I'll spend a lot of money right now to get them to run, but then in the long run, I'll have it.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
So on this topic, do you have any thoughts on whether the ideas of artificial intelligence and quantum computing, how they might affect this kind of work, or is it they'll just get faster and better?
Okay, well, I'll tell you my background in artificial intelligence. Okay. When I was taking classes at Carnegie Mellon back in 1957, 58, the guy who was the father of artificial intelligence was a graduate student or something like that at that time. He was teaching classes, and I remember him. Newell was his name.
What was it?
Now there's about 20 different fathers of artificial intelligence. He's hardly mentioned anymore. But he's one of the original. And Carnegie Mellon is really big in artificial intelligence. Where I went to school, the department that I came out of, and they're the ones that did the chess program, the computer program, the one to beat the chess master, the Watson thing. That's Carnegie Mellon. It's IBM, but those guys originally, they did that work at Carnegie Mellon. So Carnegie Mellon is very big in AI. So I have a reluctance to badmouth AI. However, I tend to not care about my friends. If I think something's wrong, I don't like it. I say it. And I'm not a big fan of AI. And the reason is I think I can do things that a computer will never be able to do. I guess that's the reason. Even though I recognize how valuable it is to have a computer to do things, it's still a stupid animal. And it's always a stupid thing to me.
Well, it seems that, and I'm looking at one of your chapters is titled Probability and Statistics. It seems to me that there are perhaps too many variables for AI to be used for, determining orbits or, making these sort of calculations. Maybe in time it'll get better, but it doesn't seem like it would work now.
Yeah, well, you probably wouldn't do the statistics on a flight computer. But if you took the equations that just have to do with just making it go and forget about the statistics, you're right, though. The statistics will kill you because you can't do that with AI. Because there's too much. You have to know what variables are important at what part of the mission. Like if you're out in space, and there are no planets within a couple astronomical units, it's highly unlikely you're going to run into a planet. So you don't have to worry about that. But when you're orbiting a planet, you don't have to worry about the solar pressure because the solar pressure acts over many days and everything happens within a few hours when you're in orbit. So solar pressure doesn't do much to you because time is short. So there's a lot of that kind of knowledge you have to put to the problem. But I could write a program that would actually compute the trajectories, optimize the trajectories, do the orbit determination. Orbit determination is what I've spent most of my time doing recently, and that's determining where it is by processing a lot of data. That's not AI though. It would be hard to do AI.
So just kind of an aside, but I know the Chinese have a satellite at L1, I think, for their moon mission, and I'm curious why doesn't the U.S. put a satellite up in that area? Or is it too expensive and not?
JPL doesn't do everything. And the guy at Johns Hopkins, his name's Farquhar, he was the big guy that figured out orbits around L1. I worked with him on a near mission, and he actually came to work at the same company, Kinetics. I worked with, after I left, he came to work at Kinetics. So I know him really well. He's dead now, but I don't know him really well. But he's the guy that's for sending missions to L1. Well, he's kind of a character that kind of pissed off JPL because he was always doing things that he shouldn't be doing. He would trick NASA into putting capability onto spacecraft that they don't need, so that after they completed their main mission, he would be able to do some other things that he wanted to do, and he wouldn't kill anybody.
Okay.
And he's that kind of guy. Well, I like that guy. So even though he was a jerk, I kind of liked him anyway. I have mixed feelings about him.
Mm-hmm.
So JPL just stayed. But any of the reason you don't want to go to L1, there's nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a mathematical point in space. There's nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
Now you couldn't use it as a staging point for a spacecraft because you can orbit L1.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look, the trajectory I designed goes very close to L1. It goes by L1. And so Farquhar claims that he had invented what I had invented. And this is before he's going to be the mission off. He was the mission manager for this near mission that I worked on for 5 years, at APL.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm at JPL, so if I'm at JPL, I pointed out to the management at JPL after I had agreed to work on it, and all that, okay, they're going to use my software. So I said, okay, let's go in. I said, there's one little problem here, though. I said, I'm not going to take any crap at all from APL, and I'm not going to do anything that they want me to do, unless I think it's the right thing to do, and I'm going to be independent. And the reason is because it's illegal for me to work for APL. It's written into the law. JPL is not allowed to have any of their employees go and work for some other organization. Mm-hmm. That was back in the 60s. Okay. And as far as I know, that law is still on the books.
Okay.
So a JPL employee is not allowed to go and work for Lockheed, as part-time, like that, or under them. They have to work under JPL, at JPL.
Right.
Well, I was working under Johns Hopkins because they didn't know how to do navigation, so they needed us. And so I wanted to keep it such that we would work and do the navigation, but do it as an independent operation at JPL, and then just do it for them, like we do all the other missions. Mm-hmm. But this was such a complicated mission, and it's the reason that I decided I wanted to work on it. Normally, if it's a simple mission, I won't. If I thought anybody else could do it, I try to get them to do it. Mm-hmm. And if there's nobody else, if I think that there's nobody else that can do it but me, then I'll work on it. Otherwise, I don't want to be bothered.
Okay.
So this was one of the missions that I thought I had to do it because of my software, and I'm the only one that really knows how my software works. Mm-hmm. And if I just walk away from the software, they'll never be able to figure it out. So I'm working on this mission with Farquhar, and he says that he had thought about this trajectories because it goes close to L1. It goes out there about 1 million. L1's about 900,000 kilometers away out there somewhere, mm-hmm. And so one time I'm at a conference, and he made this statement, and we're at a conference, so I'm standing there, and I told him, I said, all right. I said, do you have a paper that documents that you have done this work before? And he kind of didn't answer me. And I said, well, okay, if you don't have a paper, I'd appreciate you keep your mouth shut because I don't figure that I should have to answer people who are claiming to have done something where they have never documented it. Mm-hmm. Which is the way science works, by the way. Mm-hmm. If you do something and you don't write a paper, it's like you didn't do it.
Right.
So I kept reminding a lot of people of that because they kept saying that they did something they decided, look, did you write a paper? No. Okay, then you didn't do it.
Okay, got it.
So I did that to Farquhar. So Farquhar decided he doesn't like me. Mm-hmm. So for 5 years, I'm working under him, and he did everything he could to make sure he didn't have to talk to me even, practically. But that was good for me because I wasn't going to listen to him anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like I've never been nice to managers because I don't like them, but I always got along with the people that I work with, mm-hmm. And I always did what you have to do. You have to treat everybody like you're equal. You can't treat people like you're the smart guy and they're the dumb guy. Mm-hmm. You do that, you're just not going to get anywhere. Management does that all the time. They just think that whatever they decide, that's the truth, and that's all there is to it. Yeah. But once you get into a position where you're the manager and whatever you just decide is what everybody has to go along with, mm-hmm. which is like Trump, like working for Trump, then you never get anywhere. Nobody wants to work for you.
Yeah.
And not being a manager, I had a tremendous advantage because I could threaten people too. Mm-hmm. I could threaten them. If I didn't like what they were doing and I thought it was wrong, I could say, okay, take it to your supervisor, and if he agrees with you, then I'll get my supervisor. And we'll get together, and if you're right, I'm going to quit, and you can take over because I will never work on a project unless I'm right. So if there's any question about me being right, I'm gone.
Yeah.
Well, I won that argument all the time. Nobody ever wanted to go to challenge me.
I'm speaking with James Miller, author of Planetary Spacecraft Navigation. You can find more information on the Springer website for the book. If you like this podcast so far, please subscribe to it and rate it and review it if you can. Please go to my Facebook page, Spacewalks Money Talks, to find links to interesting space-related videos created by others. Please go to my Twitter page at SpacewalksMT for links to space news and science information. Please check out my Instagram page, Spacewalks Money Talks, for space photos. Please check out my YouTube channel, Spacewalks Money Talks, for space-related videos I've made. You can also sign up for my newsletter at spacewalksmoneytalks.com. In the newsletter, I post video and news links, as well as regular updates on new space, science, business, and history books being published. If you're interested in other kinds of history, such as military history, or film, TV, books, and comic books history, including science fiction, fantasy, and horror themes, you can find the links to my other podcasts and associated book lists at historyrabbithole.com. That's rabbit as in the animal. historyrabbithole.com. Thank you for your support. And now back to the podcast. But stepping back to L1, the reason I ask about that is because isn't that why the Chinese are able to put their probe on the far side of the moon, because they have a communication satellite up around that area? That's why I was asking about it.
Oh yeah, that could be that makes sense. In other words, that would L1 would be out there that you could then look at a spacecraft on the backside of the moon. Yeah.
So that's just.
And I'm sure the Chinese are aware of my trajectory. It was the Japanese that had a spacecraft that was stranded, and I had more fun with that than just about anything that I've done, because the Japanese don't like to ever admit that they've done anything wrong. Well, welcome to JPL. You try to find somebody that try to get Trump to admit that he's done anything wrong. That'd be easier than getting JPL management to ever admit that they've done something wrong. The Japanese are even worse.
Oh, really?
And so the fact that I generated this trajectory meant that the Japanese would have to admit that they didn't know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That they were wrong, essentially.
Yeah.
They first of all, they didn't even want to admit that the spacecraft had failed. They didn't want their. Okay, so all kinds. This was a very bad decision on their part, because they even wrote it. I even have a telegram that they wrote to my manager, essentially telling my manager that to silence these guys that are making too much noise. They're talking about me. And my manager, he gave it to me. He's laughing. I said, I remember telling him one time. I said, "Look, I'm not giving them my work. That's it. I'm taking credit for it. I don't care what they think."
Yeah.
But at one point, the NASA administrator went to Japan, and he was talking to a bunch of people there and giving a talk, and he used as an example that this trajectory was one of the great things that JPL where there was cooperation between Japan and the United States. He had no knowledge of how little cooperation there was. But on the other hand, after I got the trajectory, the problem was to send the problem was informing Japan about this trajectory, so that they know that they could do this. Well, they're sitting up there with the spacecraft going around the Earth, and it's time critical. Well, so I got the memo written. My friend wrote it, actually. We both wrote it together, and then the Deep Space Network supplies the money to us. They gave me $25,000 to study this thing, and I gave half of the $25,000 to the guy down the hall, because he was helping me. You can't buy me off with money. You have to go. 25 is too little to buy me off. So I'm concerned. Okay, so anyhow, so then they have to send the memo over to Japan, and they sit on it. They won't do it, because there's absolutely nothing that you could do or invent that management at JPL is gonna back you up on. they're going to assume that you did something wrong, and they're not going to do anything because they don't want to. They're going to get in trouble. They're afraid they're going to get in trouble by sending my trajectory over there.
Mm-hmm.
So I told the guy, I said, look, here's this. Who was working with the BSN guys. I said, if you don't send that memo over there today, I'm going to send it. They don't have any choice in this matter. That memo has to go to Japan, even though we're giving them something that we could write up and keep secret and write all kinds of papers about, just a trajectory. But they have a real mission, and this is money. So they need to know this. And some stupid bureaucrat at JPL is not. I'm not going to sit around and let some stupid bureaucrat hold that up from them getting this information.
Right.
So we sent it over. They sent it over immediately. Immediately, I get a telegram back from Japan. And it says something like, "Thanks a lot. This is really the greatest thing we've seen." It actually is a day later because they actually did some work to verify that what I was saying was true. This is really wonderful. Your discovery. The guy gave me total credit for everything, and I thought, gee, this is great. I couldn't believe it. Well, then certainly after that, their management finds out that we had done this, and they want to squash us and get us out of the loop and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I had this memo or this email, I guess it was, and I stuck it in my file, and I thought, if I bring this to their attention, the guy that sent it to me is really going to get in trouble. I didn't even know who he was. I did know a number of guys at Japan. And so I'm not going to, I don't want, this email that he sent me is never going to see the light of day unless it's absolutely necessary. It's still in my file. I never sent it. I never showed it to anybody. But I did work, one of the guys over in Japan, a young guy, he was a very young guy, Yamakawa was his name. He took this work that I had done, and Ed, I'll include Ed too, and I do now because it's 50-50. I've given up on trying to get 100% credit for this. So he did his PhD thesis on it. And he did some really good work. The problem was he's putting a lot of stuff in there that I had done myself. I understood and done what I understood. He's explaining it. But I had never written a memo like that explaining anything. I just showing the results of the trajectory without explaining it. I didn't have time to do the explanations. And he did such a really great job. And I figured, well, I guess it's too late for me to, now I can't write the same thing down again, do that again. But so I became friends with this guy more or less. It's hard to become friends with Japanese engineers, by the way, because they're so afraid of their management. Well, this guy is now I mentioned that his boss at the time, June, I see him at the conferences from time to time. And the last time I saw him, I said, well, how's Yamakawa doing? Because I don't know what's going on. This is 25 years ago now, okay, when I was doing it. And he looked at me and he said, oh, he's fine, And I did some searching around. I determined Yamakawa is now way high up in the Japanese space program.
Oh, wow.
He's like really important. And I know him. I could call him up and talk to him, I couldn't do that at JPL. Nobody would know me.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Did you do any work on anything with the International Space Station for any reason? No,
I've never worked on anything manned.
Okay.
I worked on a rocket one time. I worked on the last rocket that JPL ever made.
And what was that?
I don't. This is a whole story. I could tell you these stories. We can go on for another 4 hours. I could keep telling you these stories because I remember them all. Because anything that strikes me as funny or unusual, I can't stop remembering it.
Oh yeah, sticks with you.
But during the Vietnam War in 1966, right before the Tet Offensive. The Air Force came to JPL and asked them to get support to design some weaponry for the war effort. And the problem that they were having, there were a couple of problems. One was the mortars they were firing mortar rounds into the base at Dan, I think, and they didn't know where the mortars were coming from because they're in the jungle. So what they came up with is they put these JPL designed the system to put microphones around the Air Force base, and they're called hot wire microphones. And essentially, it's a jug about as big as a gallon jug, and it has a mouth at the top that's about an inch or two across, and they string a hot wire across there. And when the ground wave from a mortar blast comes across that jug, the air goes into the jug and cools the wire. So you can get a computer, you can detect that electronically, and you get a time stamp for when the wave hit that jug.
Okay.
Well, then you get 3 or 4 of them, and you can triangulate and find out where the mortar's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I worked a little bit on that, but not very much. I'm glad I didn't, because one of the guys at JPL was doing this, and he got killed.
Oh, you went out there?
He went out there to do it, yeah. I never got that far, but I worked on a target marker. We had a rocket. They would fire these white phosphorus, which turns out to be it's like a war crime, I think, just to fire these at people, because white phosphorus is really bad when it gets on you. I didn't know that at the time.
Right.
But they were using these white phosphorus rockets with white phosphorus warheads on them, and they'd fire them from a Cessna airplane. The airplane would fly around, and they'd see something that they want to bomb, and they'd fire these things at them.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that they would fire them would be to create a puff of smoke.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't fire them at people necessarily, but then the A-1 aircraft would circle around at 10,000 feet, and they'd come down and bomb that target.
Got it.
So it was a target rocket capability.
Yeah.
So we came up with a rocket where we put some chemicals into the propellant, so that when it fired, it would create a smoky trail.
Ah.
So be a smoky trail from the Cessna down to the ground,
mm-hmm.
because otherwise the guys up in the airplanes, they wouldn't see it, because the puff of smoke was under the jungle foliage.
So you have sort of an arrow, almost like a smoke arrow to the point.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was more complicated than that, but anyhow, I wound up working on that for about a year or so,
mm-hmm.
and we went on and made some test firings at San Clemente Island,
mm-hmm.
and we had this rocket program going on, and I'm supporting. The reason I'm doing it was because everybody else wants to work on space, and they didn't want to work on anything military.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I had all this military experience, so that, I must have killed half of the world population in studies of dropping bombs on Russia or something like that. I was working on the Minuteman program.
Yeah.
And see that I run the program and it hit targets, and we just make up targets and do that just to see if the program is working.
Oh, that's
so
what you mean.
I didn't have any conscience when it came to working on things like this, so I just did it.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out that was one of the most fun things that I ever did, was working on that rocket. It never really got deployed anywhere,
mm-hmm.
but to my knowledge, I don't know. Once you work on something in the military, after you get done with it, it goes to somebody else, and then you lose track of it. You don't even know what happened.
Right. So, yeah, I'd love to talk about the other stuff, but with the time, I'll maybe we can talk in the future. But right now, I'll wrap it up for this book discussion. Do you see any technological advancements coming up that could affect any of this work that you describe in the book?
Well, mostly, I think that I could, with what's in that book, mm-hmm. navigate any mission that the U.S. is likely to do in the near future,
okay.
the next 100 years probably,
mm-hmm.
anywhere in In other words, if you wanted to go to a star, that would be. I haven't thought about that at all.
Mm-hmm.
But anything, the mission that when I worked at Kinetics, that was the last 5 years before I retired in 2003, I guess I retired.
Mm-hmm.
No, 2007.
Mm-hmm.
5 years I worked there on the New Horizons mission to Pluto.
Mm-hmm.
That was our mission.
Okay.
And that involved, since there's a 4-hour light time, it takes 4 hours for light to get from here to Pluto, and then 4 hours for it to get back.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're trying to track, you have to wait for a long time before you can close the tracking loop, so to speak.
Yeah.
We count. In other words, essentially what we do is we count 1 billion times a second times 4 hours worth of seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's all. That light goes then to Pluto, and then so you got 1 billion times 4 times 3,600 times 2
Mm-hmm.
pulses you're counting. We count them, and you can't miss one. If you do, that's a 13 centimeter error.
Okay.
So that's how we navigate by doing that. And so that's the last bit of extra technology that I did.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are hardware improvements that are coming up that I don't have anything to do with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, there's a guy that I used to work with at JPL. I've heard that he quit the navigation section because I guess he got tired of it too.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's always, if you're ambitious and you want to make money or advance, you have to get out of the navigation section because it can be a real dead end. The kind of work that I do is a dead end. Nobody follows in my footsteps at JPL. They look at me and they say, I don't want to do what that guy does. But this guy went over to work with the science
Mm-hmm.
on an atomic clock. If you could put an atomic clock on a spacecraft, that's what you need to count these these pulses. I'm talking about a billion times 4 times that,
Mm-hmm.
many billion pulses. You need an atomic clock to keep track of it.
Okay.
So the atomic clock, actually hydrogen masers that are at the tracking stations.
Mm-hmm.
And so they want to put an atomic clock. So he's working on that, putting that atomic clock on a spacecraft.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he goes over there, and I doubt that he has a degree in electrical engineering. So if you're not working on the electrical aspect of it, then what are you doing over there?
Mm-hmm.
I guess they figure they needed him to figure out how you'd use it for navigation. But then he's not going to be responsible for anything that has to do with navigation if he's not working in an electronics instrument section.
Mm-hmm.
So I stayed away from doing anything with hardware once I finished Mariner 6 and 7. That was my last time I worked on hardware. Before that, I worked on lots of hardware.
Oh, okay.
And then it's all computers for me.
Mm-hmm.
So new computer technology, I think you can forget about it. Like I told one guy, they were telling me that how wonderful they get along with management because the management has improved so much at JPL since I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, the reason it's improved so much is because you're not doing anything. And it's essentially true. Because I said, well, of course I added on to that. I said, because I did it all before I left, which is also true. At the time, I didn't know that was true, but I think that's true.
Yeah.
There isn't anything left to do.
Hey, it makes sense.
That was true when I worked at the nuclear submarine.
Mm-hmm.
That all the work had been done in the late 40s and the early 50s. I guess the Nautilus was launched around 1954. I guess all the work as the high nuclear safety was done before I got there.
Mm-hmm.
So now they hire me in. So why would they hire a guy that doesn't know anything about it to do this very important work? And the reason is their attitude was it's all done and nuclear power plants are perfectly 100% safe and you don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah.
Because they're safe.
Yeah.
And so that was before 3 Mile Island. That was before Chernobyl. That was before Fukushima, the Japanese thing.
Mm-hmm.
But while I was at Westinghouse, a reactor blew up up at Arco, Idaho, and we were sort of responsible for the safety of that reactor. When they immediately made us responsible for it.
Mm-hmm. But
the guys at Arco were and what happened is the guy pulled a control rod out of the reactor. It blew up and pinned them to the ceiling and killed 3 of them right on the spot. And they buried them in lead coffins.
Yeah.
And at the time, I just assumed this was all secret.
Mm-hmm.
So I never said anything about it to anybody for many years. And then I saw a TV show, and it had the whole thing on the TV recently, Freedom of Information Act. But nobody talks about that. That is the only explosion of a nuclear reactor that was an accident ever in the United States.
Okay.
All the other things were just meltdowns. It was meltdowns after you shut the reactor down.
Right. It's a pretty good safety record, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's what they kept having me work on safety was perfectly safe because there wasn't really anything to do. However, when I went to Martin, I got to work on a reactor that was new. See, where everything hadn't been done.
Mm-hmm.
And I managed to do one thing there. It was very important, but I didn't know that it was important until 50 years later.
Mm-hmm.
A paper that I wrote back in 1963 wound up on the ResearchGate website 50 years later. I thought they were asking me if I was the author of this paper. And I looked at it, I said, no. And I looked at it again, and I recognized the other two authors. I said, wait, that is me.
You've done so many great things that the older stuff gets forgotten, right?
Yeah. If you do something great, I've done a couple. If you can do 3 great things in your life, 3 noteworthy things, that's it. You're a success, a big success.
Yeah.
And these things that you do that if you worked at it really hard for like 5 or 10 years, and then something happens that you discover something that's really neat. Yeah. At the time you discover it, you're absolutely convinced that it's nothing important. I've had this experience 2 or 3 times now. So you don't do anything. You just say, look at it, okay, big deal. Once you understand it, it's simple, so you don't care anymore.
Yeah. That makes sense.
It's hard to realize that nobody else has ever done this before.
Yeah.
But when you work in space, the one thing nice about working in space at the time I worked in it, it wasn't worn out like the nuclear. In the space program, there were a lot of things that had not been discovered that were new, and you can actually work on them work on missions for the. I was working a lot. Most of the missions I worked on, I was the first time it's sort of been done. And so you could do, when you do something, you almost everything you do is something that's new. I don't think I've ever discovered anything that any really great scientist or mathematician would think would be significant. But if it involves a lot of money, then to me it's significant.
Yeah. Where can people find you on the web? Do you do website, web page, or social media at all, or anything like that?
I had a web page, and the last time I went looking for it about a year ago, it wasn't there anymore. The company that had the web page just went out of business.
Oh.
And then my web page just went with them.
Yeah.
I thought I owned the website, but apparently I don't.
Oh, it's one of those deals. Yeah. Where they actually registered in their name.
I kind of lost it. I had put a couple of papers that I'd written on that website. The ones that, I put them on there with the idea that these are things that I've done that I think have been overlooked. Because nobody recognizes that I did them. But they're significant to me. So I was trying to gin up information for me to be a consultancy. So I was trying to brag a little bit. I think that Springer, my publisher, managed to get a hold of that website because I detected that from some of the things that they said that they got that off of the website. Me bragging about doing something,
Right. Okay. So,
well, one of the things that have been very hard for me to do, my wife has no sympathy for me at all. She thinks I'm a narcissist. One of the things that I learned very early in my career, when I first started working in the military end of it, the Russians were, it was a Cold War, and the Russians were beating us to the punch on just about everything. And so my thought was, and everybody's thought was, we're sort of competing with the Russians. So anybody who was a prima donna and wanted to get credit for what they did, nobody got credit for anything. In fact, you would write huge documents and your name wasn't even on them. Like the reactor plant manual, a group that I worked in, we all did different sections of it. The reactor plant manual was like 4 volumes, and there were like, really, lots of stuff in there. About 20 guys that wrote it, and nobody's name is on it. Well, the first place that I ever went to work where if you did something that was kind of like an official project thing where your name was on it, the JPL, they were the only people that, because Caltech really has a big deal about publishing. They want your name on it.
Yeah.
Well, the problem with that is that now all of a sudden, instead of having people who don't care at all about getting recognition for anything, your recognition is you get a pay raise.
Oh.
And that's it. Nobody gets recognized for being smart about anything. Everybody's just dumb and equal.
Right.
Well, whereas at JPL now, you've got all these prima donnas there, and they're all trying to be do things that get in the newspaper and all that kind of stuff. And so I just kind of ignored that crap for about 20 or 5 years, and then I just said, well, since I'm not working and supporting the projects like I used to, and I'm doing all these papers, I should get recognition for my papers at least. And then I decided that the prima donnas are right. If you're not a prima donna, you're not going to get anywhere at JPL.
Yeah.
So I forced myself into becoming an extremely egotistical, whatever you want to say, person. I do everything, and I'm perfect, and I never make a mistake, all that kind of crap.
Yeah.
And it's the only way you can survive in an environment like that.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. And then things go to my head. Once if you get a little bit of success and recognition, it always goes to your head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you begin to believe you really are smart. People keep telling you that.
Yeah.
The guy that stole the paper from me, Time Magazine had a list of the 100 most influential people in the entire United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
He made that list.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, he's influential. He doesn't have any influence over me. I got more influence than him. If it ever came to an argument about anything I was doing and he got involved in it, I can't imagine that anybody would listen to him over me.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. I know those lists are kind of.
But he was the TV guy. He's always on TV. Everything happened. He shows up on TV a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people know how to sell themselves. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, some people are not. If you do the kind of work that I did, you can't be interested in selling yourself. You have to have other people sell you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So I do try to keep enough friends.
Mm-hmm.
Like my favorite quote from John Donne, "No man is an island."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can't be an island.
No.
I don't care how smart you think you are.
Yeah.
Even Einstein couldn't be an island.
Yep. That's true.
You have to have other people recognize your work, and they have to support you. Otherwise, you're just not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, that's true. That's all the questions I have. Do you have any final thoughts or words?
I hope I covered enough about why I wrote the book. I don't know if I said much about that or at all, but
yeah, you did.
I think the main reason that I wrote the book, I wanted to tell you that,
mm-hmm.
is because I thought that I looked at the books that are out there,
mm-hmm.
and they don't really describe how you actually do navigation. And people at JPL who would be capable of writing a book like this
mm-hmm.
don't want to do it because like we always say, it's like making sausage.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to tell anybody what you put in it.
Yeah.
So when we dealt with any outside agency, that was the first thing we would say. Well, we will do the navigation, but we got to make sure we never let them. We tell them that it's like making sausage, but we're never going to tell them how we actually do it, what goes in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because if they did, they're just going to criticize.
Yeah, yeah.
So I held all that back for 30 years,
mm-hmm.
and I stayed with it, realizing I'm not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed the work I was doing. I always enjoyed my work.
Yeah, that's important.
And if you can do that, that's the number one thing to do. And I give that's the advice that I would give any student.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take a job because you're going to make 20% more money.
Mm-hmm.
If you enjoy the job that you're doing right now better, stay and do what you enjoy doing. It takes a lot of money to pry me away from what I really enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And they're just not going to have the money to do it.
Yeah. You want to be motivated when you wake up in the morning and go to work.
Yes, that's right. Well, not only that, but most of the problems I solve, I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and then I start thinking about them, and that's when I solve them.
Yeah.
What I like about my job more than anything else, especially since it's so heavily involved with mathematics, is that I can do it anywhere I am.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to be at a desk. I don't have to be in a car. I don't have to be anywhere. I can just be walking down the street, and I can start working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and thinking
true.
about it. And then I think things, one of the things that I was talking about something about writer's block. I never had writer's block writing the book,
mm-hmm.
because what I do is I walk around and I compose essentially what I'm going to say in my head, and I go over and over it about 100 times.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I sit down to write it, it's just easy the words just flow right out onto the paper.
Yeah.
Worst thing in the world you can do is sit down in front of a terminal and deciding you're going to write something, and without having thought about it beforehand.
Right. Yeah, that's good
You're
advice.
just going to sit there and stare at the terminal. You're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, thank you for speaking with me.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, Spacewalks Money Talks, please subscribe to it and rate it and review it if possible. I have many other options as well to get great space information. You can find links to interesting space videos on my Facebook page, Spacewalks Money Talks. You can find links to interesting space news articles and academic information on my Twitter page, SpacewalksMT. You can find photos on my Instagram page, Spacewalks Money Talks. You can find my videos on my YouTube page, Spacewalks Money Talks. You can also sign up for my newsletter at spacewalksmoneytalks.com. In the newsletter, I post additional video and news links as well as regular updates on new space science, business, and history books being published. Thank you for listening.